Chapter 1. The Pulse Beneath the Noise. There is a rhythm beneath the static. A quiet signal that thrums below the surface of every ordinary moment. You don't hear it. Not with your ears. It isn't loud, but it is relentless. It pulls at you, not with force, but with presence. It does not shout, but it never stops speaking. It is the silent magnet. And it has always been there. Even now, as your breath draws shallow and your skin brushes against the cold machinery of routine, something ancient moves beneath your ribs. A longing not born of want, but of knowing. The kind of knowing that doesn't arrive by education or inheritance, but by remembering who you are before the world told you otherwise. You see, you were not designed to be an echo. You were not born to follow lines drawn by trembling hands. You are a pattern breaker, a storm in stillness. And yet, somewhere between fear and conformity, between survival and sedation, the world taught you how to dim. It fed you rules, limitations dressed as realism, ceilings made of suggestion. It whispered in your youth, be safe, be quiet, be reasonable. But the great ones, they never listened. Thomas Edison burned his fingers chasing light. Not once, but thousands of times. Henry Ford was laughed out of the room when he said horses would be replaced by engines. Walt Disney was fired from a newspaper for lacking imagination. They did not possess some secret formula, only a willingness to hear what others could not. A devotion to the silent magnet pulling them beyond the visible. And what of you? What voice inside have you buried? What vision did you shelve in the name of practicality? What part of you still wakes in the quiet hour, when no one is watching and aches for more? This is not ambition. It's not ego. It's not fame. This is older. Deeper. It is the unspoken desire to become. Not for applause, but for truth. Not for validation, but for alignment. And that longing, that is your compass. That is the magnet pulling you forward, not toward comfort, but toward the edge of who you are, and the unveiling of who you could be. Because here is the truth they never taught you. The world does not move for the loudest voice. It moves for the clearest one. The one that doesn't need to scream to be heard. The one that walks into a room and says nothing, but changes everything. This first chapter is not about goals, or strategy, or tactics. It's about awakening. Tuning in. Feeling again. Not just with your thoughts, but with your blood. To realize that the furnace is still burning, even if you've been ignoring the heat. There is no more dangerous illusion than a life half-lived. And no deeper agony than a gift unused. You are not put here to be a placeholder. You are not a variable in someone else's equation. You are an original note in the song of history, and if you don't play your part, the melody will never be whole. But let me be clear, this path is not for the faint. Because to follow the silent magnet is to walk into darkness with only your conviction for light. It is to be misunderstood, mocked, and left alone at the crossroads while others take safer roads. But do you know who else walked that way? Lincoln, whose own cabinet thought him unfit, yet carried the weight of a torn nation on his back with unshakable resolve. Carnegie, a poor immigrant boy from Dunfermline, who forged steel with his will and gave it all back to humanity. Mandela, locked behind bars for decades, while his vision aged into something the world could no longer deny. And you? Maybe you're not famous. Maybe no one knows your name. But the pulse you feel? It makes you kin to every titan who's ever walked this earth. That pulse is the inheritance of greatness, not measured by trophies, but by the courage to build when no one believes but you. It begins with listening. To the space between noise. To the stillness beneath movement. You do not need a spotlight to lead. You only need alignment. Because there is power in integrity. Power in quiet conviction. Power in the man or woman who doesn't seek to be impressive, but to be true. They call it charisma when you master this. They call it gravitas. But all of it is built on one thing, resonance. A life that resonates, not echoes. A presence that draws, not demands. This is your moment. Not to fix, but to feel. To feel that tug that's been there since before you could name it. The one that has followed you through childhood daydreams and sleepless nights. The one that asks, what if you stopped playing the part and became the author? This world does not need more noise. It needs signal. It needs frequency. It needs you, not as you've been told to be, but as you are when no one is watching. It needs the fire, the ache, the impossible clarity that comes not from looking outside, but from coming home to what's always been inside. And so, the journey begins, not with a declaration, but with a decision. A vow to no longer abandon yourself in the name of fitting in. To no longer dim your essence for the comfort of the crowd. To listen. Fully. Finally. Because when you do, you'll hear it. The signal. The rhythm. The voice without sound. The silent magnet, pulling you not towards something new, but towards something eternal. The truth of who you are. And that is only the beginning. Chapter 2. Mindset, the alchemy of perception. Before kingdoms are built, before inventions spark, before revolutions rage through the streets of history, there is something quieter that happens first. A shift. Invisible, internal, seismic. The world may call it mindset, but it is so much more than a frame of thought. It is the lens through which reality is born. It is the soil from which every outcome will rise or rot. The mind is not just a battlefield. It is the architect, the director, the unseen puppeteer behind every movement of your life. And it's not passive. It's not neutral. It is shaping you even now. Your thoughts are not whispers, they are weapons. They carve into your days like the hands of a sculptor. And yet, most people live as if their thinking is an accident, random, reactive, untrained. As if the brain is a cage, not a forge. As if reality is something you find, instead of something you form. But you are not most people. Not if you are still listening. Not if you felt the pull of the magnet that speaks in frequencies, not words. The great ones understood this before anyone else. They were not made of different blood. They were made of different belief. Edison saw light in darkness, while others saw a failure. And again, over 1,000 times, he defied the ridicule of those who never dared to try once. His experiments were not just in science, they were in the mastery of his mind. When Henry Ford said, "Whether you think you can, or think you can't, you're right," he wasn't offering a fortune cookie. He was giving you the equation. The raw blueprint of creation. The factory of will. But belief is not blind. It is forged, pressed under heat, sharpened against resistance. And that is where most surrender. Because the world teaches you early how to doubt. It wraps you in rules. It tells you your value is conditional. That your potential must fit within numbers, grades, titles. That your identity is a checklist of achievements and failures, a story written by strangers, and your role is to follow the plot. But a dangerous thing happens when you decide you are not the audience, but the author. When your thoughts stop asking for permission. When your mindset becomes a crucible instead of a mirror. You begin to bend reality. Not through magic, but through attention, through repetition, through the audacity to challenge the first story you were told, and write a better one. Lincoln stood on the edge of a nation fractured by hatred, and chose unity when all around him screamed for division. His mind did not collapse under the burden. It rose. He found clarity in the chaos, because he had already won the war inside. That's where it always starts. If your mind is fractured, your vision will blur. If your mind is small, your world will shrink. But if your mind becomes a cathedral, every challenge becomes a doorway. Every wound becomes a window. Every setback becomes signal. Mindset is not positive thinking. This is not about slogans or smiles. It is war. It is choosing, deliberately, ruthlessly, what to plant and what to burn. What stays. What dies. You will be challenged. You will be tested. But if your thoughts are trained, you cannot be shaken. Your body may ache. Your bank account may fall. Your friends may leave. But your mind, if it is sovereign, will not be moved. You don't need an army when your mind is a fortress. And you don't need permission when your mind is a kingdom. But the truth is this: you cannot build that kingdom with the bricks of fear. You cannot build it from guilt, from shame, from the opinions of people who have never dared to become anything more than spectators. You must unlearn. Unlearn the need to please. Unlearn the addiction to certainty. Unlearn the myth that success is inherited. Success is summoned. and you summon it first with your eyes. Not your physical vision, but the lens through which you view the world. You either see obstacles, or you see opportunities disguised as pressure. You either see danger, or potential. And what you see, you reinforce. You're not just reacting. You're rehearsing. Every thought is a rehearsal for the life you will live. So, rehearse wisely. Walt Disney was bankrupt. He was betrayed. His ideas were mocked, his vision stolen, his dreams crushed beneath contracts and red tape. But he held the picture. In his mind, Disneyland was real before one brick was ever laid. That's the secret. The mind doesn't wait. The mind builds first. The world catches up later. And in the quiet hours, when doubt creeps in, when the crowd grows louder, when logic says, stop, your mindset is the voice that says go. It is the fire beneath your silence. It is the magnet behind your pull. It is the reason why some walk into a room and shift the air without opening their mouths. Because their mind was shaped in the dark, while others were waiting for light. Your circumstances are not your cage. Your current situation is not your sentence. You are not limited by your past, your resources, your genetics, or your resume. You are limited only by the frame through which you interpret challenge. Your mind is your inheritance. It is the great untapped empire waiting for you to crown it king. But to do so, you must choose sovereignty. You must rule it, or be ruled by it. And make no mistake, if you do not choose your thoughts, they will be chosen for you. By fear, by media, by culture, by comparison, by history. But if you do choose, if you take the throne of your own perception, if you decide that every thought must earn its place, that every belief must serve your becoming, not your comfort, then the world begins to bend. The magnet pulls stronger. You begin to draw not what you want, but what you are. And what you are is forged first in the unseen. A mind no longer reacting, but commanding. Not hoping, but deciding. This is mindset, not as a concept, but as command. It is the first brick in the cathedral you are about to build. So lay it from relentless. And know that from here, everything else begins to rise. Chapter 3, Clarity, the blade that cuts through fog. The storm is not the danger. The fog is. Lightning may strike, waves may crash, but it's the haze that blinds you. The quiet confusion. The slow drift into mediocrity disguised as motion. You think you're moving forward. You feel the churn, the exhaustion, the weight. But in truth, you are circling. Clarity is not a luxury. It is not a feel-good quote or an optional virtue. It is survival. Without it, even the strongest heart loses direction. Even the loudest ambition becomes noise. Even the most brilliant mind falls victim to the illusion of progress. Clarity is the blade. And most never sharpen it. They chase shadows. They chase paychecks, attention, approval. They climb ladders only to realize, too late, that the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall. But you, if you are willing to awaken, you must choose to see. Clarity is not about having all the answers. It is about asking the right questions. What burns in you that the world has tried to silence? What do you want, not in the polite, polished way, but in the raw, unfiltered hunger that keeps you up at night? What are you here to build, to become, to ignite? Strip it down. Make it ugly if you must. Truth isn't always clean, but it is always necessary. Because you cannot hit a target you cannot see. You cannot rise above the fog until you know what lies beyond it. Think of the greats, those who moved mountains not because they had all the tools, but because they had unshakable focus. Andrew Carnegie began with nothing. Not less than most, nothing. A boy in a Pittsburgh basement, working 12-hour shifts. But his mind was locked onto something far beyond soot-covered walls and steel beams. He had clarity, not just on wealth, but on why he wanted it, to elevate, to liberate, to create. Clarity creates force. It turns a whisper into a roar. It turns a man into a movement. But here's what no one tells you. Clarity is painful. It means killing your illusions. It means admitting where you've lied to yourself. It means holding up the mirror and seeing not who you pretend to be, but who you truly are and who you are not. Most run from that. Because clarity doesn't coddle. It confronts. But if you face it, if you stop hiding behind confusion as an excuse, you will find something brutal and beautiful. Direction. Not perfection. Not a straight line. But a north. Clarity doesn't mean it will be easy. It means it will be undeniable. Look at Lincoln. He didn't see every step ahead. But he saw the moral compass, the immovable direction. A house divided cannot stand. He saw beyond popularity, beyond politics, to something unchangeable. And when the bullets came, when the country ripped at the seams, his vision did not blink. That's clarity. It is seeing the mountain while you're still in the valley. Feeling the summit in your bones before the climb ever begins. But here's the danger. The world will always try to fog your vision. They will tell you to be realistic. They will hand you maps for lives that aren't yours. They will applaud your busyness, even as you drift from purpose. You will be surrounded by the noise of urgency, of trends, of comparison, and none of it will bring you closer to truth. That is why you must return, daily, to the silence. That is why clarity isn't something you have, it's something you cultivate. Every morning you must ask, what matters? What am I building? What must I say no to? This is not about productivity. It's about purity. It's about cutting through the fog with the blade of purpose. Because until you know what you stand for, you will fall for every distraction dressed as opportunity. You will chase other people's dreams, wear other people's definitions of success, and wonder why your soul feels like it's drowning in invisible waters. But clarity liberates. Clarity makes you dangerous, not to others, but to your own doubts. It is the anchor that holds fast when storms rage. It is the torch that lights every room you enter, even if you say nothing. And yes, it isolates. Because when you know your path, you will have to walk alone. But better a lonely road with purpose than a crowded one that leads to nowhere. Walt Disney had a clarity that outlived rejection. When everyone said no, he built anyway. When banks closed their doors, he opened new ones. Because in his mind, the castle had already been built. He simply had to keep laying the bricks. That is the power of vision. When it's clear, it burns hotter than fear. But clarity must be earned. You earn it in silence. In stillness. In the brutal honesty of asking not what will make you popular, but what will make you whole. You earn it by cutting the rope to every voice that doesn't belong in your story. You earn it by saying no, to comfort, to distraction, to everything that dims the fire. And when you find it, when you truly know, not think, not hope, but know what you are here to do, you will move with a different gravity. People will feel it. You won't need to convince them. You won't need to explain. You'll walk in silence, and the air around you will shift. Because the silent magnet is clarity. And once you find it, you never move the same again. You don't rush. You don't beg. You don't chase. You pull. Through certainty. Through presence. Through a fire that cannot be seen, but is always felt. So ask yourself, can you see clearly? Can you cut through the fog? Because in the end, greatness is not about how fast you move, but how clear you are on where you're going. And why you must arrive. Chapter 4. Vision, the invisible blueprint. It begins in the dark. Not with applause. Not with followers. Not with resources, connections, or permission. It begins with one human being, somewhere in silence, holding a picture in their mind so vividly that reality starts to bend around it. That picture is vision. And it is not decoration. It is not fantasy. It is the seed of every empire that ever rose. The blueprint beneath every revolution. The first breath of every cathedral ever carved from stone. Before it is seen, it must be believed. And that is why vision is not for the many. Most prefer the safety of what is. But visionaries? They fall in love with what could be. They are called foolish, unrealistic, dreamers, until the world catches up to what they saw decades before. Do you know what Ford saw when the world was clinging to horses? Do you know what Rosa Parks saw when everyone else saw a bus seat? What Jobs saw when phones were still bricks and music was plastic? They saw what wasn't there. They felt what had not yet been built. And they trusted the invisible over the obvious. That is the power of vision. It is not passive. It creates. It disturbs. It reshapes what we believe is possible. It draws the unseen into the seen with a force that turns doubters into believers, and believers into architects. But here is the truth: vision is costly. You will be mocked for what you see. You will be questioned, ridiculed, betrayed. Because you are no longer living inside the present, you are building the future. And the future is always a threat to those who are married to the comfort of now. You must carry that weight. Not just once, but daily. Every morning, you must choose to see again. To wake up and hold that image in your mind's eye even when nothing in your current life reflects it. Even when your bank account laughs at it. When your friends can't understand it. When your family doubts it. When your circumstances seem to scream, "Be reasonable." But vision is not reasonable. It is radical. It rewrites rules. It doesn't fit within lines. It makes lines. Walt Disney stood in an empty orange grove and saw an entire world. Castles, lands, magic. Everyone else saw dirt. He saw destiny. And so he moved, brick by brick, into a dream that had not yet breathed. That is the difference between the visionary and the voyeur. The voyeur waits for signs. The visionary is the sign. And when the storm hits, as it always does, the visionary doesn't retreat. They refocus. They refuse to forget what they saw. Because the vision is not a luxury. It's not a poster. It is their identity. You are not just a dreamer. You are a creator. And vision is your first tool. It doesn't require money. It doesn't require fame. It requires alignment. You must build a mind that can hold an image so intensely that the outer world has no choice but to rise and match it. Because the universe moves not for the desperate, but for the decided. And nothing declares a decision like vision. Unwavering, undiluted, unapologetic. But understand this, you must protect it. Because this world is hungry for your attention. It will sell you trends in place of truth. It will offer you comfort in exchange for calling. It will tempt you to settle, to shrink, to replace your deepest vision with someone else's highlight reel. You must turn down the volume of the world, to turn up the volume of what you've been given. No, it won't be easy. It won't be obvious. Because the silent magnet does not shout. It draws. And your vision must do the same, not just to others, but to yourself. When you sit alone with no accolades, when you feel like a fool holding a blueprint no one else can read, you must see. And you must act as if the world is already catching up. Because it will. That is how every monument was born. That is how nations were raised. That is how men and women stepped from obscurity into legacy, not because they had a map, but because they had a picture. A picture so clear, so rooted in purpose, that it became a magnet, pulling resources, people, events into place as if by gravity. But it's not magic. It's law. What you consistently hold in your inner world will shape your outer world, if you refuse to abandon it when it gets hard. So write it, draw it, speak it, live as if it's already here. Because vision is not something you chase, it's something you embody. And when you do, others will feel it, even in silence. They will not be able to explain it, but they will be pulled, just as you were. That is the unspoken power of those who see clearly. They don't follow trends. They set the course. Not with noise, but with direction. Not with crowds, but with conviction. And so I ask you, what do you see? Not what they told you to see. Not what the world expects you to want. But what lives in you. What refuses to die. What demands to be built. That is your vision. It may not be loud. It may not be visible. But it is magnetic. And if you honor it, fully, daily, relentlessly, your life will become the proof. Not a whisper. Not a wish. But a force. Unstoppable. Undeniable. Silent. And yet it will draw the world to you. Chapter 5. Purpose, the fire that doesn't burn out. You can fake motivation. You can fake discipline for a while, wear the mask of effort, mimic the movements of those who are truly driven. But you cannot fake purpose. Purpose is the fire that doesn't burn out. The force that cannot be borrowed, bought, or fabricated. It is either lit within you, or it isn't. And if it is, nothing can extinguish it. Purpose doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need applause, or the security of a paycheck, or the convenience of a perfect time. Purpose moves, even in silence. It builds when no one is watching. It stays up long after the lights go out. It wakes up early, long before motivation stirs. Because purpose is not a feeling, it's a source. It's not about what you do, it's about why you cannot stop doing it. In a world obsessed with outcomes, purpose is what keeps you tethered to something bigger than ego, deeper than ambition. It is what you cling to when the path gets brutal, because it always does. And if you don't have purpose, you'll let go. But if you do, you hold. You don't quit when you're tired. You stay when it hurts. Because you're not working for a moment, you're working for meaning. Purpose isn't always glamorous. It's not the highlight reel. It's in the small, thankless hours. It's in the grind no one posts about. It's in the conversations you have with yourself when everything falls apart and the world forgets your name. But if your why is deep enough, nothing can pull you off the path. Look at the legends. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't march for attention. He marched because something inside him refused to be silent. He faced dogs, water cannons, death threats, not for glory, but for purpose. Something sacred, something written on his soul long before the crowds gathered. Helen Keller, born without sight or sound, still became a voice. Because purpose isn't limited by circumstance. Purpose transcends the flesh. It moves through walls, through pain, through impossibility. Look deeper, and you'll see that purpose is not something you find, it's something you remember. It's already in you. You felt it in quiet moments. In the questions that haunt you. In the ache that doesn't go away no matter how comfortable your life gets. That's purpose knocking. But most ignore the knock. They fill the silence with noise. They numb the discomfort with busyness. They settle for achievement without meaning. And one day they wake up, surrounded by success, but empty. Because success without purpose is the loudest emptiness of all. Purpose is what makes the work sacred. It turns a job into a mission. It turns obstacles into offerings. It turns suffering into sacrifice, and sacrifice into legacy. Think of Abraham Lincoln. He didn't lead because it was easy. He led because the soul of a nation was on the line. He knew the cost. He felt the weight. But purpose gave him strength. Strength not born of strategy, but of surrender to something greater than himself. That's what purpose does. It humbles you. It elevates you. It reshapes you from the inside out. And if you dare to walk in it, you will no longer ask, "What do I get?" You'll ask, "What do I give?" Because that's the shift. That's when the magnet begins to hum louder. That's when your presence begins to pull, because your life is no longer about noise, but about signal, clarity, frequency, meaning. People feel it. They may not understand it, but they're drawn to it. Because deep down, they're starving for it. Starving for truth. Starving for depth. Starving for someone who knows why they're alive. Do you? Not in theory. Not in a motivational quote. But in your blood. Do you know why you wake up? Do you know what breaks your heart, and must be healed because you're here to do it? Because until you know that, nothing else will matter. Your goals will fade. Your energy will wither. Your drive will collapse under pressure. But with purpose, you become immovable. Because purpose doesn't shift with circumstances. It doesn't bow to doubt. It burns, consistently, relentlessly, quietly. Like the silent magnet. Unseen. Unspoken. And yet, undeniable. But purpose demands something. It demands that you stop living small. That you stop pretending you were born to just make it. It demands that you stop chasing applause and start chasing alignment. Purpose asks for everything. But it gives more in return than the world ever could. Because when you walk in purpose, your life stops being a performance and becomes a message. And even in silence, that message will draw. Not by force. Not by hype. But by truth. There is nothing more magnetic than a human being who knows why they are alive. They don't need to convince. They simply exist, and everything around them begins to move. So look within. Strip back the noise. Ask yourself, not what's popular, not what's profitable, but what's pure. What calls to you in the night? What would you do if you knew no one was watching? What pain are you here to end? What beauty are you here to create? That's your purpose. Not handed to you, but carved out by fire. Hold it close. Because it's not just your fuel. It's your compass. It's your crown. It's your magnet. Chapter 6. Discipline, the backbone of becoming. Discipline. The word alone carries weight. It sounds cold, sharp, unforgiving. And yet, beneath its surface is freedom. Because without discipline, you are a slave. A slave to your moods, to your impulses, to the ever-changing winds of doubt and distraction. Discipline is not punishment. It is permission. Permission to become who you were meant to be. The great illusion of modern life is that freedom is doing whatever you want. But that is chaos. That is collapse dressed as liberty. True freedom, the kind that shapes destinies, is found only through structure, through limits chosen, through mastery of the self. That is discipline. And without it, all your clarity, all your vision, all your purpose will rot on the vine. Because purpose is potential. Discipline is the path. It is the bridge between who you are and who you must become. You want to be magnetic? You want to move mountains in silence? Then understand this: no one builds cathedrals by accident. You think Edison worked when it was convenient? You think Lincoln led because he felt like it? You think Carnegie forged an empire without waking up every day and doing the dull, brutal, unglamorous work that no one else would? Discipline is not flashy. It is repetition. It is choosing again, and again, and again. When the mood is gone, when the energy is low, when no one is watching, when the applause has faded and all that's left is you, and the next brick you must lay. The undisciplined life is a house with no foundation. It might look beautiful for a season, but the first storm will crush it. But the disciplined? They endure. Because discipline doesn't just build habits. It builds identity. When you do what you say you'll do, not once, but consistently, you begin to trust yourself. That trust compounds into confidence. That confidence becomes certainty. And that certainty becomes presence. You walk into a room different. Not louder, but deeper. People feel it, even in your stillness. Because you have done what most refuse to do: master yourself. The undisciplined crave results. The disciplined crave the process. They fall in love not with the reward, but with the rhythm. That's the difference. One chases moments. The other becomes momentum. And momentum, once earned through discipline, makes you unstoppable. But here's the thing most don't realize: discipline is not born. It is forged. You don't wait for it. You train it. You create friction. You remove choice. You make it easier to do the right thing than the wrong one. You architect your environment. You curate your influences. You kill off the voices in your life that water your weakness. Discipline begins in decision, but it lives in design. Carnegie had a daily routine so exact it frightened people. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, wrote meditations on duty while the world tried to tear him apart. Navy SEALs wake up before the sun not to impress, but because ritual precedes reliability. The silent magnet does not attract through intensity. It attracts through consistency. You think gravity is loud? It's constant. So should you be. Stop waiting to feel like it. You won't. Stop needing to be inspired. You won't be. Inspiration is a spark. Discipline is the engine. And the engine must run even when the road disappears. Even when doubt screams louder than purpose. Even when the voice in your head says, just skip today. You don't. Because that's the moment you prove who you are. Not when it's easy. When it's excruciating. Because that's where few go. That's where legends are made. The gym when it's cold. The page when it's blank. The business when it's broke. The speech when your voice is shaking. Do it anyway. Because discipline doesn't need applause. It doesn't need reward. It needs only a reason. And your reason is why you started this journey in the first place. Don't betray it. Every time you follow through, you tell your future self, I will not abandon you. Every time you honor your word, you rewrite your story, from victim to creator, from dreamer to doer. Discipline is the only difference between most people and their potential. It is the daily decision to honor your destiny over your desire. And yes, it will hurt. It is sacrifice. It is early mornings, late nights, delayed pleasure, denied comfort. But it is also peace. The peace of knowing you are becoming the kind of person the future you will thank. And that is priceless. That is rare. That is magnetic. Because in a world of shortcuts, those who stay the course become sacred. They become trusted. They become silent giants. Not because they yelled their way to the top, but because they kept showing up. Brick by brick, rep by rep, word by word. They became gravity. So now the question is no longer, are you motivated? The question is, will you obey the fire you said you would follow, when everything in you wants to quit? If you will, then know this. The world is already shifting around your decision. Your consistency is drawing opportunity. Your commitment is shaping identity. Your discipline is making you dangerous. Not in the eyes of others. In the eyes of your old self. The one who used to doubt. The one who used to wait. The one who used to break promises to themselves. That version is dying. And in its place, a builder rises. A force awakens. A presence is born that doesn't need to be loud. Because it is felt. And what is felt cannot be ignored. Chapter 7. Action, the language of the aligned. The world doesn't change when you think. It doesn't change when you plan, when you talk, when you dream. The world only shifts when you move. Because action is the final proof. The only language the universe obeys. Not intention. Not desire. Not potential. Action. It is the signature of those who are no longer interested in living in theory. It is the blood in the veins of the aligned. The soundless roar of the silent magnet, pulling not with charisma, but with consequence. Thoughts are seeds, but action is the sun. Without it, the idea never leaves the soil. Without it, your greatness becomes decay, potential that never became performance. You know this already. How many times have you felt the pull, the fire, the clarity, and then paused? Overthought. Overplanned. Waited. For permission. For signs. For the right time. But those waiting for the right moment never create one. And those waiting to feel ready never begin. Readiness is not a prerequisite of action. It is a result of it. It is forged after the leap, not before. Every giant, every architect of destiny you admire, they didn't know they could do it. They moved anyway. They stepped into the unknown, shaking. And the ground held. They acted before they were qualified. And the act itself qualified them. Abraham Lincoln had no formal education, but he stood before a divided nation with words that shaped centuries. Amelia Earhart climbed into a cockpit not because she was certain, but because she refused to live a life ruled by doubt. This is the way. This has always been the way. Not perfect action. Not elegant action. Just movement. Aligned. Courageous. Daily. Because motion does not wait for mastery. It creates it. Think of this. What if you began treating every action not as a task, but as a vote? A vote for who you are becoming. Every time you rise early, you vote for the builder in you. Every time you keep your word, you vote for the leader in you. Every time you speak when your voice shakes, you vote for the free soul in you. And those votes compound. They echo. They draw. They speak louder than words ever could. You think you need to convince the world? You don't. You just need to move. Because a person in motion is undeniable. They don't argue for their worth, they prove it. They don't ask for opportunity, they create it. And slowly, silently, magnetically, the world responds. But let's be clear, this is not hustle culture. This is not chaos disguised as ambition. This is aligned action. This is deliberate movement born from clarity, vision, purpose, and discipline. This is not just doing more. This is doing what matters most, especially when it's hard, especially when it's lonely. Because the aligned don't act from pressure. They act from principle. They don't move to impress. They move to express what's already alive within them. And that's the difference. The imitator acts out of urgency. The magnetic move out of knowing. They don't talk about legacy, they lay it. Brick by brick. Day by day. Silently, while others sleep. You may not see their name on a screen, but you'll feel their impact in a room. That's action. Not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that earns respect. the kind that resonates. And here's what you must understand. You don't need to change the world today. You just need to move the needle. One phone call, one paragraph, one workout, one decision to not negotiate with the old version of you. Because every step forward, no matter how small, sends a message. I am not who I was yesterday. And if you send that message enough times, you become someone no one saw coming. But you saw it. You moved before it made sense. You moved when no one clapped. You moved when your legs shook and your voice cracked and your confidence flickered like a dying flame. You moved anyway. That is the language of the aligned. Not noise, but signal. Not reaction, but intention. Not fear, but fire. So ask yourself right now, not, what do I feel like doing? But what must I do to become who I said I would be? Then go do it. Without asking. Without waiting. Without needing the whole staircase. Just the next step. And the next. And the next. Because this world is not moved by brilliance alone. It is moved by execution. You don't need to be the smartest. You don't need to be the most talented. You just need to act when others freeze. To begin when others hesitate. To continue when others collapse. To finish. And when you do, your life becomes the message. The signal. The gravity. The silent magnet. And everything you were meant to draw begins to move toward you. Because you no longer talk like the person you were. You act like the person you're becoming. Chapter 8. Gratitude, the power hidden in the present. It begins so subtly, you hardly notice it slipping. That sense of wonder. That reverence for what already is. You get caught in the chase, addicted to what's next. You start measuring your life by what you lack, instead of what you carry. And so, the heart hardens. The fire dims. And the soul forgets. But the ones who remember, those who walk with the quiet strength of something deeper, they carry an old secret. Gratitude is not softness. Gratitude is strength. It is not the passive smile of the satisfied. It is the unbreakable core of the aligned. It is the eyes to see clearly. It is the grounding force beneath the mountain you're building. Because no matter how fast you move, no matter how far you climb, if you lose gratitude, you lose your gravity. You drift. You forget. And what you forget, you begin to forsake. But gratitude anchors you. It roots you in truth, not fantasy. It reminds you that abundance is not a future state. It is a present awareness. And the irony is this. The more you feel grateful, the more you become a magnet for what others are chasing. You begin to draw blessings without begging. You begin to attract people, opportunities, breakthroughs, not through effort alone, but through energy. Because the truly grateful radiate something rare. A presence. A power. An invisible frequency that cannot be faked. Because when someone walks into a room full of peace, presence, and purpose, the world notices. Not because they're loud, but because they're rooted. That's gratitude. It's the ability to look at your current life, not through the lens of comparison, but through the lens of reverence. I may not have all I want, but I already have all I need to begin. That is not denial. That is not resignation. It is alignment. It is choosing to see clearly before you demand more. Because if you cannot honor this moment, you are not yet ready for the next one. Gratitude sharpens vision. It clears the fog. And from that clarity, clarity attracts clarity. The world begins to move in your favor not because you forced it, but because you stopped resisting it. And this isn't theory. This is historical. Look at Helen Keller, who could not see or hear, but still found light in the dark. Because she chose to live in thanks, not in lack. She once said, "So much has been given to me, I have no time to ponder over that which has been denied." That is gratitude in its highest form. And it is limitless power. Because when you stop focusing on what's missing, you start magnifying what's already working. And what you magnify expands. What you praise stays. What you ignore decays. So look around you. Look within you. What have you been too busy to notice? What in your life is already sacred, but has become silent in your eyes? Gratitude reawakens the sacred. It brings color back to the ordinary. It puts soul into structure. It slows down the moment just enough for you to see again. Because you can't rush through life and expect to feel rich in it. You must pause. You must honor. Not once a year. Not once a week. Every day. Every hour if you must. When the storm hits. When the money runs low. When the motivation dies. You stop, you breathe, and you give thanks. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are still here. Still breathing. Still becoming. And that is a gift. Gratitude is not circumstantial, it's positional. You can be surrounded by blessings and still feel bitter. Or you can be in the fire and feel blessed. It's your position. Your choice. And that choice is what separates those who attract from those who chase. The magnetic don't wait for perfection. They activate their power by honoring the present. Even when it's broken. Even when it's messy. Even when it hurts. Because gratitude doesn't deny pain, it transcends it. It transforms suffering into soil. It turns setbacks into teachers. It sees the beauty within the breakdown. And those who walk in this power, they are rare. They are grounded when others drift. They are joyful when others panic. They are full while others crave. Not because they have more, but because they see more. They live not in lack, but in legacy. Because gratitude fuels every other virtue. It deepens discipline. It sharpens vision. It ignites purpose. It fuels action. And without it, all of these collapse into performance. But with it you become undeniable. You become a presence the world can feel. Because your power is not loud, it's rooted. And the rooted draw what they need. Not because they beg. Because they become. So return to the moment. Strip away the noise. What if this, right now, is already sacred? You will find your answer in stillness. You will find it in silence. You will find it in thanks. And once you find it, you will never chase again. Because the truly grateful don't follow trends. They become gravity. Chapter 9. Adaptability, becoming water in a world of stone. You were not born rigid. You were not meant to break at the first sign of change. You were born fluid, bending, shifting, evolving. But somewhere along the way, you were taught to hold tight. To grip outcomes. To cement expectations. To worship stability and resist anything that threatened the illusion of control. And yet, control is the great myth. Life is not a straight line. It is not a structure. It is a river. And those who fight the current drown. But those who become the current, they flow forward while others sink. That is adaptability. Not surrender. Not softness. Not weakness. Adaptability is not passive. It is strategic evolution. It is strength with shape-shifting intelligence. It is the fire that doesn't die when the wind changes. It learns to dance with it. The greats? They didn't survive because they had perfect plans. They survived and thrived because they pivoted. They adjusted. They responded instead of reacting. Think of Darwin, the man whose entire life reshaped our understanding of existence. Even he never said, survival of the strongest. He said survival belongs to the most adaptable. To those who can bend without breaking. To those who understand that life is not built for the inflexible, but for the fluid. Bruce Lee understood this when he said, "Be like water, my friend." Water moves without resistance. But it's not weak. It carves through rock. It fills every space. It cannot be grasped, and yet it is essential to all life. That is your call, become water. You want to be magnetic? Then stop trying to control every outcome. Stop demanding that life obey your script. Start responding like the future version of you already would. When the job disappears. When the relationship ends. When the path you trusted dissolves beneath your feet. Don't freeze. Don't fracture. Flow. This world does not belong to those who hold tight. It belongs to those who release. To those who listen. To those who ask, what is this moment trying to teach me? Instead of, why is this happening to me? Victims ask for comfort. Visionaries adjust for clarity. They reinvent. They transform. And in that reinvention, they rise. Because adaptability is not just about change. It's about agency. You may not control the storm, but you can become the sail. And the sail is enough. Because the wind that crushes one person carries another. It's not the storm. It's your shape, your flexibility, your willingness to redefine yourself without losing your essence. You are not your job. You are not your title. You are not your past. You are the force beneath all of it. And that force? It learns. It evolves. It survives not by resisting change, but by riding it. Thomas Edison failed 1,000 times not because he loved failure, but because he learned faster than the world could defeat him. He did not define himself by what didn't work. He adapted, each time closer to the breakthrough. You think resilience means pushing harder? Sometimes resilience means letting go sooner, releasing the outdated, surrendering the original plan to make room for a better path. That is not quitting. That is intelligent adaptation. That is leadership in motion. And those who live this way, they move with a rhythm others can't explain. Because while the world resists, they realign. While others crumble under the pressure of a detour, they say, "Good. Now I know a better way." This isn't false positivity. This is fluid intelligence. This is emotional sovereignty. This is a soul so rooted in purpose that it can shift forms without losing its flame. The silent magnet? It doesn't pull because it's rigid. It pulls because it's centered, but fluid. It knows who it is, but it's not obsessed with how it gets there. It adjusts, adapts, expands. That's how power moves. Not in straight lines, but in waves. So ask yourself, what have I been clinging to that no longer serves me? What outdated plans have become prisons? What identity am I protecting at the cost of my own expansion? It's time to shed, to adapt, to flow. Because if you stay fixed in a world that's fluid, you will fracture. But if you learn to move, you become unstoppable. Not because you can force outcomes, but because you don't need to. You trust your capacity to respond, to reinvent, to keep moving, always. Like water, like purpose, like the silent magnet that never breaks the surface, but pulls all the same. Chapter 10. Resilience, bending without breaking. Some break, some bend, and some rise. Not because they are immune to pain, but because they are intimate with it. Because they've walked through fire, not once, but many times, and chose to keep walking. This is resilience. And it does not look like what they told you. It's not about having thick skin or pretending nothing hurts. It's about what you do when it does. When the cracks show. When the world falls silent. When the plan collapses and the pain stays longer than it should. Resilience is not the absence of suffering. It is your response to it. It is not denial. It is refusal. Refusal to let pain be the end of your story. Resilience is not loud. It is not chest-thumping bravado. It is the quiet decision made deep in your chest that says, "Not today. I will not stop here." And that decision? That's what separates monuments from memories. You want to be magnetic? Then stop trying to be untouched. Be unmoved. By opinion. By failure. By the stabs that come from behind. By the betrayals that burn. Because here's the truth no one wants to say: greatness will wound you. Dreams will disappoint you. People will fail you. You will fail yourself. And in those moments, the easy way is collapse. The popular way is quitting. But the sacred way is rising anyway. That's what the legends did. Look at Abraham Lincoln, who lost 8 elections before he ever won the one that mattered. Who battled depression so thick it nearly buried him. And yet he stood. Shaking, yes, but standing. Look at Nelson Mandela. Imprisoned for 27 years, emerging not bitter, but better, sharper, wiser, more dangerous than ever, not because he fought, but because he forgave. This is resilience. Not just survival, but alchemized suffering. Pain transmuted into power. Loss carved into legacy. Setback sculpted into soul. You don't have to be fearless to be resilient. You just have to refuse to stay down. You just have to say, "This will not be the chapter that defines me." That doesn't mean you're unshaken. It means you return. Again and again. Not with naive optimism, but with unyielding resolve. Resilience is faith without applause. It is the belief that even if no one sees it, even if no one understands, it's still worth it. And here's the secret. Every time you get back up, you become heavier. Not in burden. In weight. In presence. In authority. People can feel it. They don't know your story, but they sense it in your silence. In the way you stand. In the way you no longer flinch when life swings at you. Because you've been here before. And you've earned your peace. You've bled for your stillness. And now, your resilience draws the world in. Not because you're perfect, but because you're whole. But whole. And your cracks don't make you weaker. They make you real. They make you relevant. Because the people who pull others in are the ones who've been pulled apart and put themselves back together. Without a spotlight. Without applause. Without needing someone to rescue them. Resilience is the long game. It is the quiet power of those who outlast the chaos. They don't need to be the fastest. They just need to remain. Because time is the great filter. And resilience is the weapon that time respects. When you feel like giving up, remember this. The storm will pass. But you must outlast it. And in outlasting it, you become undeniable. Because resilience breeds magnetism. A soul that will not quit pulls everything to it. The right people. The right opportunities. The right moments. Because the universe trusts you. It knows you won't waste the reward. You've earned it. Through silence. Through suffering. Through standing when everything in you screamed to lie down. So no, don't aim to be untouched. Aim to be unbreakable. Not because you never bend, but because you always return. Wiser. Sharper. Quieter. Stronger. Because a resilient soul doesn't need to speak loudly. Their presence says enough. Their eyes say, I've seen storms darker than this. Their stillness says, I've bled for this peace. Their movement says, I will not stop. That's what draws others in. That's what makes your life undeniable. The resilience to continue. Not when it's easy, but when it's necessary. So rise again. Not to impress, but to become. Because the world is watching, not with its eyes, but with its heart. And when it finds someone who does not quit, it moves in their favor. It bends. It draws closer. Because resilience is the silent magnet that whispers, I've been to the edge, and I built a bridge. Chapter 11. Learning, the warrior mindset of the eternal student. There are those who pretend to know, and there are those who remain students. The difference? The first seeks validation. The second seeks transformation. The world applauds the appearance of mastery, but the ones who truly grow are not the ones who shout, I've arrived. They're the ones who whisper, I am still becoming. This is the path of the eternal student. Not because you lack confidence, but because you crave truth. Not because you doubt your worth, but because you refuse to stop evolving. Because the day you stop learning is the day you start dying. Growth is not a season. It is a devotion. And learning is the quiet force that keeps you magnetic. Not because you know everything, but because you never stop asking, what else is possible? Think of the Titans. Leonardo da Vinci. The painter, the inventor, the thinker, the architect of ideas, was obsessed not with being right, but with understanding. He never stopped experimenting. He never stopped studying. Thomas Edison tested 10,000 filaments before he found one that could carry light. 10,000. And every failure? He didn't call it a defeat. He called it data. This is not just intelligence. This is humility. This is warrior learning. It's the kind that doesn't come from books, but from blood and sweat and iteration. It's the learning born from doing, from risking, from failing publicly and still showing up the next day with eyes open and ego gone. The ego is loud, but learning is quiet. The ego says, I already know. Learning says, teach me again. And in that space, you become unstoppable. Because no matter what is thrown at you, market crashes, losses, betrayals, breakdowns, you don't freeze. You study. You don't curse the pain. You mine it. You look at life as the greatest teacher there is, and every setback becomes a seminar, every betrayal a book, every failure a lecture in disguise. That's what makes you different. That's what makes you magnetic. Because while others are pretending, you are refining. You don't need to be the smartest in the room. You just need to be the most curious. Because the curious become the most dangerous. They adapt faster. They evolve sharper. They ask better questions and attract better answers. And while the world celebrates results, you become addicted to insight. Because insight becomes action. And action becomes authority. And authority draws others in. Not with volume. With depth. You've seen this. You felt this. That quiet person in the room who speaks last. But when they do, everything stops. Because their words are earned. Because they've been listening. They've been learning. They're not trying to dominate the room, they're trying to understand it. And that understanding makes them unshakable. That's who you must become. Not someone who fakes wisdom, but someone who embodies it. And you do that by staying teachable. Even when you're at the top. Especially then. Because comfort breeds arrogance. Arrogance kills growth. And growth is the oxygen of the extraordinary. The greats never arrive. They evolve. And they remain students until their final breath. Carnegie read for hours every day, even after he became the richest man in America. Lincoln consumed books by candlelight, not because it was trendy, but because wisdom gave him weaponry. They weren't collecting facts. They were forging themselves. That's what learning does. It doesn't just inform you, it forms you. It doesn't just give you content, it gives you character. You want to become a magnet for greatness? Then seek wisdom like your life depends on it. Because it does. Seek mentors, not followers. Ask questions more than you give answers. Write down what you learn. Challenge what you believe. Stay open. Stay sharp. Stay hungry. Because the moment you stop growing, you stop drawing. The moment you assume you know it all, you start repelling the very forces that could elevate you. You want to walk into a room and shift the air? Don't posture. Don't preach. Study. Refine. Expand. Let your knowledge deepen, not inflate. Let your presence speak louder than your pride. And let your humility become your superpower. Because in a world obsessed with being right, the person who listens becomes rare. And the rare become revered. The silent magnet doesn't pull by being the smartest. It pulls by being the most willing to grow. And that growth, it never ends. So here's the truth. You don't need all the answers. You don't need to impress anyone. You just need to ask, every single day, what am I here to learn today? And then have the courage to listen for the answer. That's the warrior mindset. Not knowing it all, but learning it all, relentlessly. Chapter 12. Becoming, the final hour of the awakening. You will not be remembered for what you owned. Not the cars. Not the suits. Not the numbers on a screen. You will be remembered for what you became. And not by the world. Not by history books. But by your own soul. By the echo you leave behind when your name is no longer spoken, yet your essence lingers in the lives you touched. Becoming is the final hour. The place beyond theory, beyond dreams, beyond potential. It is the raw material of your entire life, forged into presence. And it is earned. You've come far. You've waded through the mindset, the vision, the clarity, the purpose. You've taken action, you've bent without breaking. You've adapted. You've risen. You've learned. But now comes the transformation. Now comes the becoming. And becoming is not a switch. It is a shedding. Of what you're not. Of what no longer fits. Of every identity you built just to survive, but now must release to thrive. This is not about doing more. It's about being more. Being the one who no longer waits for permission. Being the one who no longer negotiates with fear. Being the one who doesn't chase validation, because their existence is their conviction. You are not your failures. You are not your accolades. You are not your past. You are what you choose to carry forward from it. So choose with intention. This is the great moment of reckoning. The edge of the cliff. The final silence before you step into the next lifetime, while still in this one. And you must decide, will I return to sleep? Or will I awaken fully, finally? Because there is no more waiting. The world doesn't need another influencer. It needs a force. It needs the quiet pull of someone who has arrived inside themselves. No more pretending. No more fitting in. No more living like a shadow of your calling. Becoming is the full embodiment of all that was once invisible. It is the marriage of soul and skin, of alignment and action, of fire and stillness. It is when the silent magnet within you becomes you, fully, unapologetically, permanently. It does not ask for attention. It does not beg to be seen. It simply is. And in that stillness, in that presence, the entire world begins to lean closer. Not because you shouted, but because you became undeniable. This final chapter is not an ending. It is a transformation. It is the culmination of every step you've taken into truth. You've seen the signs. You've followed the pull. You've bled for this version of yourself. And now you arrive. You arrive in silence. You arrive with weight. You arrive whole. There is no confetti, no parade, no grand announcement. Only the feeling, the knowing, that you are no longer hiding. You are no longer seeking. You are no longer becoming. You are. You are the discipline. You are the resilience. You are the vision. You are the presence that enters a room and shifts the air, not because of your voice, but because of your vibration. Because you did not build your life to be seen. You built it to mean something. And now, without a word, you draw others in. Because you've become what they forgot was possible. Not an idea. Not an influencer. Not an echo. But a signal. The silent magnet, fully realized, fully alive. And this is where the real life begins. This is where noise ends and frequency begins. This is where you stop performing and start embodying. This is where the masks fall off. This is where the doubts lose their teeth. This is where the old self takes one final breath and lets go. And what rises in its place is not new. It's who you were all along. Buried beneath the weight of expectation. Waiting beneath the surface of fear. Whispering beneath the noise of the world. Now risen. Now here. Now magnetic. No more running. No more reaching. You are not the seeker. You are the source. Let them come to you now. Let them feel what can only be earned in fire, silence, and truth. Let them wonder how you pull without asking. Let them question why your presence calms storms and stirs hearts. Let them feel the force that needs no voice. Because this is it. The arrival. The alignment. The remembrance. You are the silent magnet. And now, the world moves around you.